started, but my name is Alma and I work for Chinook Fund. So this is the grant application workshop for our spring 2025 grant cycle. Is everyone able to see my screen? You can do a thumbs up. Okay, I see head or nodding happening. So thank you. Few more people joining, but I'll get started. First, we have some logistics. Oh, one second. We'll do introductions really quick. But we will have interpretation during this session. The workshop itself will be in English, probably for the most, if not the entire thing. But just in case some of our friends need interpretation to Spanish, we have that available. So let's get that started now.
Yeah, I can go ahead and give the quick introduction before we start the interpretation. I'll give some instructions in Spanish first, then in English. Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Itzel y estoy aquí para proveer servicios de interpretación simultánea. Estoy aquí porque los organizadores de este evento se han comprometido con la justicia del lenguaje, así que queremos asegurarnos de que cada persona pueda escuchar y ser escuchado en el idioma de su corazón. Así que en unos momentos vamos a comenzar con la interpretación simultánea, así que van a poder ver, ya que la enciendamos, van a poder ver un icono de un mundo o un icono terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, y aquí es donde van a poder elegir entre el canal de español o el canal de inglés, y este es el canal en el que les gustaría escuchar o participar durante la sesión. Y es importante que cada persona que no sea bilingüe elige su idioma para que cuando yo cambie de un idioma a otro, usted pueda seguir escuchando en el idioma que eligió originalmente. Y si en algún momento tiene alguna pregunta, alguna duda, por favor, déjenos saber en el chat o con su micrófono y estamos aquí para ayudarles. Gracias. Hello, everyone. My name is Itzel, and I'm here to provide simultaneous interpretation services. So I'm here because the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice, and so we just want to ensure that every person in this session is able to listen and be heard in the language of their hearts. So in a few moments, we will turn on the interpretation, and once we do, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And when you click on this icon, you will have the option of choosing either the English or the Spanish channel, and this is the language in which you would like to participate and listen during the meeting or during the session. And it's important for every person who is not bilingual to choose a language, just so that whenever I switch from one language to the other, you will continue listening in the language that you originally chose. And if at any moment you have any questions, please let us know in the chat or with your mic, and we'll be happy to help. And we are good to start the interpretation.
To set up. Thank you. So yeah, welcome again. This is the grant workshop for spring 2025. In case you're applying for Chinook Fund or any of the grants. And like I said, my name is Alma Urbano. I'm the grants manager. And I do want to thank you all for being here. It is a space from your day that you decided to give to us. So I hope this is helpful to everyone. And feel free to leave us your introduction or anything you want to share in the chat, but maybe just your names, and if you want to share your organization as well, just so we know who's in the space. But you don't have to, and also you're welcome to turn off your cameras. This is more for you, so whatever you need from this space, please take that. We are recording, so we want to share this with other people who are not able to attend. So if you want to turn off your camera, like I said, feel free to do that. We will also have other people. So we have our amazing admin assistant, Hannah Rose, who is going to be helping me behind the scenes. And then we will have our finance and operations manager later on, Trina. She's not in right now, but once we go to that session, she'll be able to join. Let's move. So yeah, I see the chats coming in. Thank you. And we'll have space throughout the session for questions. But as a quick rundown of our goals, we'll do a quick history of Chinook. We'll go over the Giving Project. That's where most of our funding for grants comes from. So I'll explain that a little bit. And then we'll go into the criteria, what we do and we do not fund as an organization. One of our priorities being community organizing, but we'll go over other priorities as well. And then we have logistics. I should be able to go into the actual website and show you what it looks like in case you're not familiar with that. We did change a few things on the website. It's not major, but if you've applied in the past, it will look a little different. And then we'll share contact information and deadline. So a little bit about Chinook. We've been around since around 1987. It has not always been a giving project like it is now, but it used to always be a community, based on community grant making. So we would always have a community committee making funding decisions, although the structure has been changing since then. We have funded historically many things that had not gotten funding before Chinook, and then later on went to receive more funding. Efforts around, mostly about community organizing efforts, but immigration, we fund all types of efforts. It's not just specific issues. So health, health justice, disability rights, immigration justice, youth leadership. There's many different types of things we've funded since then. And it is based off a national network. So we are part of other Giving Project efforts around the country. It's called the Grant Giving Project Network. And the model is used in other states, but we're the only one in Colorado who does this type of effort. So our mission, Chinook Fund seeds community-led systemic change by mobilizing resources for and trusting in grassroots social justice organizations across Colorado. So that is one of the main focus. We are a Colorado-based organization and we only fund Colorado organizations. So what is a Giving Project? So this is where our money, well, most of our funding comes from. And then we do this twice a year. It's a group of around 15 to 20 individuals from the community who get together over a period of 6 months. And they fundraise the money. They also decide where the money goes. So they're the ones who are reading the applications, and the amounts available for funding is dependent on their ability to fundraise that specific amount. But when we recruit for the Giving Project, we recruit across class. So people are making their own contribution as individuals, but they're also fundraising their immediate communities. And it is diverse, both class, but in other ways as possible. And it is how we also try to do social justice philanthropy, meaning the people who are fundraising the money and the people making decisions about where the money goes are all from community members. They're not and collectively they are making collective decisions. They're not making decisions as individuals or even as staff of their organization. They do get some guidance on our priorities in our funding guidelines, but ultimately it is their collective decision. So yeah, so funding guidelines. We use guidelines and priorities. So for this workshop, funding guidelines are very specific criteria that are also requirements. So these are things that have to be part of an application for the application to move forward. So here we have the main ones. So the main things are that you have to be operating in the state of Colorado or be an indigenous regional group that is within the boundaries or mostly in our current lines of Colorado. And then you have to be an organization that has an annual budget of $250,000 or less. So this is your operating cost for your organization for the year that you're applying for. So for this one, it would be 2025. Oh, one second. Questions so far? Let me see. Okay, we'll keep going. Things we do not fund. So we don't do any, first, we don't fund individuals themselves. Like if a person had one project that they are the only person leading it, and only one bio is submitted through the application, and it's very clear that the funding is going to go through an individual, that's not something we would want to fund. But also if the organization is only doing direct services to other individuals. So if they're only doing scholarships, things that are going to individuals for doing, or immediate things. So it just, if they're doing direct services, and I'll explain more what direct services are from our definition, but we want to see more things that involve a collective group and then moving towards a collective goal, and less so like individual support. Like I said, we don't fund budgets over 350K. No. Also, we don't fund businesses or profit-making organizations unless they are worker-owned co-op that's doing an effort to collectively benefit their community or their own leadership as community members. We don't fund other foundations or pass-through funding. So this is usually organizations that are similar, like a foundation or similar to us, in that they get the funding and then they decide where the funding goes to other groups or to other efforts, but they get to decide how the money is spent as if as a foundation would. We also don't fund organizations whose work or decision-making body is based outside of Colorado. And we also don't fund anything that tries to influence the election of individuals for public office. So these are things that would automatically get application either addressed by staff asking more questions about it, or wouldn't pass the eligibility. I see a question from Dr. Halim Ali. Bullet point 3. So we do not fund individuals or organizations controlled by one individual. Is the bullet point? And we do fund organizations with a fiscal sponsor. But for bullet point 3, yeah, it just means most nonprofits organizations have a board. So they're not usually controlled by one. Even if they have one leader, they still have a board of at least 3 people. Or if they're fiscally sponsored, then they still have that kind of oversight from another nonprofit that has its own board. So there's always going to be at least 3 people who will be there as representative of where the money goes if something happens in the future. Okay. Well, keep going. So criteria. So again, this is still, there's different levels you can meet our criteria in terms of to meet the minimum requirement. But we do want all our efforts to have some version of constituent leadership, community-wide, or lasting effect as part of their application. Oh, one second. So like I mentioned, we don't fund organizations with just one person is the main leader, because we want to see constituent leadership. And that usually means people who represent communities, and usually not one individual is representing the whole community. But for this round is work that is led by the people most impacted by the injustice. we believe that those most affected by injustice have the vision and solutions for their own liberation. So if there's an effort that is trying to address a school policy, the most impacted would probably be the families and the people who attend the school as participants or kids. So we would want to see some form of constituent leadership from the youth or the families involved. That would mean a strong constituent leadership compared to another effort that is led by the school itself. And there'll be more examples later on. So similar. So if there is youth organizing, if that's the effort that is mentioned, we want to see how is youth voice being incorporated into leadership. They don't need to lead the whole process, but there has to be some effort or some attempt for them to be included in some decision-making capacity or an advisory board or some structure in place that makes them be the constituent leadership of that effort. This is just one example. It doesn't need to be youth organizing, and that's definitely not the only thing we fund. But as an example of how we want to see constituent leadership. Another example could be tenant organizing. We wouldn't want the owner of the building, if it's a apartment building, to be the main people organizing, because tenant organizing usually implies the tenants themselves are organizing and they're able to make decisions. Then the next funding guideline, community-wide. So we want to see some form of intersectionality. So work that reflects as all members of the constituency and community, particularly those who experience multiple forms of oppression. So this mostly tries to get, we want to see people working together in a collective, but we want to see some efforts of people attempting to bring different perspectives of the people who are affected in a slight different way. So a little diversity in their impact, but also just on how they experience living in that community. So if we wanted to talk about youth organizing, youth are not a monolithic, so we just want to see more representation in that leadership and in that space and how they're reaching the rest of their community, because it might not be the whole school that's involved, but it's their attempts at making sure other youth are involved in that effort as well. So questions that will be asked in the application is, how does your organization define diversity within your constituency? That's something you're able to define for yourselves. And then how do you ensure that everyone is represented in your organization, especially those with less privilege? So, the attempt to be as inclusive as possible, how do you make efforts to make that happen? Oh. And then the last main funding guideline is lasting effect. So work makes meaningful change for the community as a whole and for future generations, not just one individual in the immediate future. So this is also trying to get us, if not the next 7 generations out, at least the next 7 years. So how is your effort or your program going to impact the community in a longer term change? So things like things that address policy, things that address community leadership, building it across time, not just building a group of community leaders and then that's it. There has to be some visioning of how it's going to impact at least 7 years out. That's not a requirement, the 7 years, but it is a good kind of guideline of, if one individual were to leave, is the effort still going to be happening? So things that are, what socioeconomic, political, or cultural institutions or changes will you work to change in order to fight the injustice, what actions will come out of your work, what will be different in your community, in our society because of your work. So this one pushes it out to next generations or at least 15 years out. But you can measure how you want to communicate that in your application. Okay. So funding guidelines again, be based in communities facing injustice, have some type of democratic leadership or decision-making that is led by and accountable to those directly impacted, engage in dismantling privilege and oppression within the organization and community, and demonstrate that their work can lead to permanent or future progressive change in the community. Questions so far? Okay, we'll keep going. So now funding priorities. So these are not requirements. You do not need to meet these priorities to be part of a docket that moves forward. But it is something that we try to prioritize as an organization. So they do get a second look or a second review if you provide out information about this. So, and it may change. So these are not, this may not be the priorities in the next 2 years. They will probably be in the next few cycles. What? And these have been the priorities for the last 5 years. So rural organizations, we try to prioritize organizations that are not from metro areas. And I'll define those later on, but especially organizations that are not in the Front Range. Black-led organizations, Native-led organizations, and community organizing efforts. So again, you do not need to be or have any type of these type of organizing efforts, but these are currently getting priority. So special considerations given to groups based outside of the Front Range. So that means to be considered rural, you are not in Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, or Fort Collins. And we define community organizing by the process of bringing affected people together to use their collective power to win improvements in their community and change the power structure to advance social justice. Nope. Anderson, Spanish. And then we used Black leadership and Native American leadership as part of the effort to uplift Black liberation efforts. So efforts that specifically addressing the economic justice, community control, and political power of Black people in Colorado. So the main doesn't need to be a Black-led organization, but that is the priority. But we also look at the narrative of what that means for their efforts and how they're addressing Black liberation in their application. And then we also want to uplift Indigenous sovereignty. So Native-led organizations might get a priority, but we also look at preserving tribal existence, protecting tribal natural resources, promoting Native American human rights, holding government accountable to Native laws, developing Indian law and educating the public about Indian rights, laws, and issues. So those are the other priorities. And then community organizing. Components of community organizing work. So it's usually, and this is how Chinook Fund defines, but community organizing is a grassroots, has a grassroots base of support. A strategic direction driven by that base there's clear demands for policy or systems change. You don't need to submit a power map, but there is an idea of which power making officials need to be reached. And your power officials may be your own immediate community, or it may be like more policy-based work within schools or within neighborhoods, within cities. So it doesn't need to be, this is not a requirement to submit a power map. We just want to know who is the power being addressed if your effort is a community organizing work. Oh, one second. And then the leadership ladder of sorts. So we want to see, are leaders creating other leaders, or is it a one-time effort? And then there's no future leadership created. Again, these are only things if you are doing community organizing work specifically, and that is your main type of work that you're applying for. And we specifically define community organizing as different from these. So we don't think community organizing is direct services only. So we're looking at organizations. There may be organizations that are doing food delivery for people who are not able to go get their own groceries. That effort alone would not count as community organizing and would probably be lower in the priority list of the docket, because it also doesn't have anything with leadership. It doesn't have a base, or it might have, but maybe they're not communicating that. And it is only what we consider direct services, which are important and needed things in communities, but they're not our current priority. We differentiate community organizing from education and advocacy. So education and advocacy efforts could be anything from an ad on the newspaper or an ad on TV that says, we should change this about the community or something like that. Or it explains why this type of vaccine is the best option. That effort alone could be considered education, but on its own, it wouldn't be community organizing. And then we also define community organizing as different from empowerment. And empowerment could be, I specifically see it more with youth. So there's many organizations that will say they empower youth to make better decisions in their community. That on its own would not be considered community organizing, and it would not be a priority for Chinook. Unless there are other things that are uplifted that are part of the other criteria or part of the other priorities. But within our community organizing, it wouldn't be a priority. And then I do want to go back to advocacy. So we also define advocacy different than community organizing. So advocacy could be advocating for a specific community in policy, or informing people, educating people at a specific policy at the state or city level or neighborhood level. But if that's only advocacy and there's not an effort for community members to lead that advocacy effort, and it's only outside organizations that are doing the work, and it is probably very important work as well, but it is not involving the community, then it would not count under community organizing. I do see a question. We will have examples, so let's move to that. So this again, services. Let me jump to community organizing. So an example of a community organizing effort would be this fake organization that is called Powerful Families. It's a women of color-led organization committed to reproductive justice in rural Colorado. Through grassroots community organizing, we amplify the voices of those often unheard, particularly focusing on issues like rural abortion access and contraception, After a year of in-depth listening sessions with our neighbors, we compiled a comprehensive community report reflecting the real needs and aspirations of our community. Now, in partnership with bigger organizations, we are mobilizing to lobby for equitable abortion access for all, including undocumented immigrants and recent legal permanent residents who are not eligible for Medicaid. So this is kind of simplifying their work or the work that similar organizations do. But this is just an example of what would be community organizing if it came through the Giving Project volunteers. Okay, other questions? So we explained, I already kind of went over these, but I'll share the PowerPoint. It has other examples of things that we do not consider a priority because they're not community organizing. So things like I was saying, direct services. So if you are offering things like resources that wouldn't otherwise be available that are probably more immediate, like food, vaccines, transportation, healthcare, then that wouldn't necessarily be a priority just because we want to uplift community organizing more. Advocacy, if it's a group that is doing education and advocacy on behalf of other people, that's usually lower priority. And empowerment. And again, these are very important programs. We just have more limited resources and we want to uplift community organizing and other priorities. So that's why we focus there. But there are other types of community organizing that are often not considered community organizing, but other foundations that we also want to highlight. So the first one is cultural organizing. Cultural organizing integrates arts and culture into organizing strategies. It is about organizing from a particular tradition, cultural identity, community of place, and worldview. So an example of this is the mission of Denver Black Queer Collective is to provide protective and supportive and uplifting space for Black or queer Black people in the Colorado community. And we believe in collective joy, healing, safety, queer resistance, and effective activism. So they may not fulfill the entire definition of community organizing as we see it in terms of having like a clear leadership ladder or a clear addressing clear power structures in their community. So they may not have those things, but they are still uplifting the other part of culture organizing within their communities. So we define this as a sub-unit of community organizing, and it is a priority under the umbrella. And then the other one is healing justice. So this is how oppressed communities holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence and how they innovate collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on their bodies, hearts, and minds. So an example of this would be Indigenous Well-Brighted program in Cortez, Colorado. And we also frame this under community organizing because it's a specific people or group of people who are organizing within themselves to address a need within their own group through their own traditions that are often not funded by other organizations. So they still meet the criteria, so the requirements of being constituent-led, community-wide, and in their description, they're able to communicate the lasting effect across generation. by addressing different healing techniques and using that as a health justice. Okay, any questions so far? So this is a slide on our strongest applications are able to demonstrate how they work with the long-term vision. They have achieved successes that have positively impacted their community. They see themselves as part of a larger movement. They offer alternatives to existing institutions and systems, and they take risks by doing work that is marginalized or emerging. So you can go to a website to see our past grantees or current grantees. That is also helpful when deciding to apply. And we fund all types of efforts in areas. So our timeline. So our current application deadline is February 13th. So about a month, less than a month from now. And the screening meetings happening around May. Site visits if the organization is selected as a site, or to move us to a site visit, then it would happen between May and June. Final decisions happen around mid-June. Final notification happens at the end of June. And this is, as you can see, this is a long timeline because the Giving Project volunteers are fundraising during this time as well. So, and they usually, I don't know what the past fundraising goal has been, but right now it's staying at least 80K. So $80,000 is around the minimum the group is trying to fundraise. That may change. But they're fundraising that amount as they're reviewing applications. Is a site visit required? A site visit is not required, but it is actually, I mean, it is required if it's the next step if the docket moves along. So there's different steps of reviewing meetings that happen, but typically a site visit will be required if the organization moves to the next round, to the final decision making. So a site visit allows the Giving Project members to meet the organizations that they believe already may have a chance at receiving funding, but they still need to make final decisions based on the amount of money they're in the process of fundraising. So a site visit is very, if you get invited to a site visit, you should definitely attend a site visit because it will allow the Giving Project members to ask you any questions that have come up during the application process. So yes. Unless something happens and we don't receive as many applications and the group feels very strong about your application, then site visits may not be required, but usually it is a very important steps in their decision-making process. Okay, we're gonna go to the application. Is a site visit to the applying organization or to the Chinook Fund location? Or site visits are virtual. So they would happen over Zoom. Does that address your question, Christina? No. Yeah, you wouldn't, especially, yeah, I will still have them virtual, so you don't have to have an office to have the site visit or anything. Before we leave the slide deck, would it be possible to review the slide right before that one with the current grantees. Is this the slide? Oh. Yeah, we can open. Oh, one second. Oh, the Strun application. This. Someone in the chat is asking to review this slide. Okay. Yes, we have time. Are there any specific questions or would you just like more time to review it? Like we just one more minute to review this. But there is another question in the chat. What if one of our partners is out of the state? Or one of your partners is out of the state. Is that okay? So the primary applicant is in Colorado. I think it depends. So you'll still be applying as yourself as the organization in Colorado. So you may have partners as elsewhere, but the work has to be done in Colorado by Colorado. So that would be the only thing. But yeah, we will ask who else you're working with as part of the narrative, but it's not unless we see an issue with the other things like the bios or the budget or something else that brings questions, then it doesn't really matter who your partners are. Okay. Keep it moving. So this is what our application one second. Looks like, and you may find it by going to our website. So on our website, you just go to how to apply. And then you click access our grant application portal. I already logged in. So we're gonna go back here because it's gonna log me out of the sample application. We do have a language function. So it is the Google Translate option, but you can select the language on the far left top corner. And Spanish should be one of the top options. If you are applying, if you're applying in Spanish and need support, we are able to support. Or if you know a partner or another organization that is applying, we are able to support them beyond just having it on Google Translate. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions about that. But it is available for you if you need any language or most language on the Google Translate dictionary. And then you would create, if you're a new applicant, you would create new account. And then you have something else that says, if you think you're a new account, but you're not sure because you might have gotten funding in the past, also reach out to us to make sure we have like your consistent profile on our end. So in case you have gotten funded in the past, we would want to uplift that. Oh, so this is more information about the language. There's some chat. Yes, we will be sharing the presentation after to the registrants. And Hannah Rose already responded. Sorry, I just saw that. So first you will create your account. It's going to ask you for your organization information, your individual user information, like your login and password. If you're not the executive officer or the executive director or the main leader, is going to ask you for that information as well. So click, you'll be able to create an account by clicking the blue create an account button. Then you'll follow the password requirements and your account ID or your username will be the email that you use. So once you have that, I missed something. And please try not to create duplicate accounts. It's not a big deal if you do. It's just going to take a moment behind the scenes to make sure that the correct application was sent in. Or you will just have many applications show up on your email box. But usually your one email you can only use it for one account. So you won't be able to create many accounts with just one email. So after you are successfully registered on our system, you'll see something like this. And this is a fake. It might be a real organization, but for this process, it's going to be a fake organization. This one says edit for some reason, but it will say something else, submit or apply. But the first thing you'll see is an eligibility spring 2025 survey. So it's going to ask you, do you operate in the state of Colorado? Or your regional indigenous group? And if you are not either, or if you're not in Colorado and you're not a regional indigenous group with overlap of Colorado voters, then it's not going to let you move after you submit eligibility. Also, if your annual budget, so this is your total operating costs, it says total amount of expenses for your current fiscal year, then you're also not going to move through if you're over 350K. So that's just for our own. Oh, sorry. For our own, to make sure we process some applications before they get farther into the process and turns out they're not even based in Colorado or their budget is way out of our requirement. So this is the eligibility quiz. Oh, one quick note. If you were denied during our previous cycle, so this would be if you applied in the fall 2024 cycle and are hoping to apply again in the spring 2025 current cycle, you actually have to wait until the fall 2025 cycle to be eligible. And that's just to give, because we just read your application, or the Giving Project read your application, we want to give a chance to organizations that are emerging or that are applying as new organizations to have a chance at getting their application reviewed instead of us reviewing the same application back to back. And so that's why we have this requirement. So you just have to wait until the next cycle. Again, that's the eligibility form. So completing the application. So say I operate in Colorado and my budget is 24K. Submit eligibility. Ignore. Continue. Oh, it's gonna say click continue to view the apply page. Continue. So this is what the application should look like for this cycle, spring 2025. And it's gonna let you, it's accepting submissions until February 13, 2025. So then you just click apply. Oh, hopefully that's not what happens. Why isn't it working? Let me know if that's how it shows up on your end. But let me see. It might be because it's a fake account. I'm hoping that's why. Maybe click apply here. Oh. Okay, it's not working on my end. Yeah, I'll look into this. We do have drafts. We have people applying right now and they look okay. So do let me know if something runs out. Or if that's something's not looking right on your end. But yeah, it might be partially completed. That's why it's not showing up. But this is some information you have if you want to read through it. It's going to tell you the same things I'm going over during the training. But since that's not working the best it could. These are the questions that should be coming up. So there's different sections. Oh, there's a question. Yes, it will save every minute, or I forget how long it saves before it goes away, or how fast it saves your work. But there's a question asking if you're able to partially save for later. Yes, but it will give you an option that says save. And it has a separate button that says submit. So if you save, even if you accidentally submit, it's gonna tell you it's incomplete. But you save, and if do try to click the button that says save, because if you just leave it, it might still save it for you, but it's not as you don't know how much it's gonna save for you. And if for some reason you submit it before the deadline, if you submit it and you think and you review it later and see that a question is completely off and you won, and it's gonna affect your ability to share the work you're doing, you may also reach out to us and we may be able to reopen it, depending on how far out we are from the deadline. But the sections in the application are general inquiries, so just who you are, what you do. And then we have funding questions, narrative questions, year milestones. Oh, what happened? One second. Oh, that's not bad. Financial form, leadership information, diversity chart, and references. So it seems like a lot, and it is like a pretty extensive application. And the reason we do this is because the giving project members may not be familiar with your work. So that gives, because they are not staff, whom even if you apply even if you already applied and received funding in the past and have a relationship with Chinook, the giving project members may not have as much of that context to be able to more thoroughly review your application. So we just want to give you as much space as you want or need to share your information. But we will tell you when the questions are required. So there will be an asterisk. You're able to, if you've applied in the past, even if as a draft that was abandoned or something, you should be able to view it on your profile if you're using the same account. You should be able to autosave, but try to make sure it's saved. And then you'll see the status of your application. You can download a PDF. I'm not able to show you yet right now, but if you see in the top right corner where it says question list, if you want to download a PDF of the questions so you can read them in paper format or as a PDF before you start writing the questions online, you can do that as well. It will download and then you have to, if you want to print, you have to print separately. So continuing. Once you start the application and it lets you apply, then you should be able to edit the application. Unless you submitted it. If you need any accommodations, definitely email us at grants@chinookfund.org. This is more overview. We will ask for 3 to 5 milestones with at least one strategy to achieve them. This used to be goals. If you applied 2 years ago, it used to be 3 to 5 goals. We just changed the language, and you have the option of doing 3 to 5. So you can only do 3 if that's what you want to do, or you can do up to 5. And we just ask for a strategy on how to achieve them. So an example of a milestone, and it could be a short sentence, or some people submit a whole paragraph. It depends on how descriptive your sentence is, but a goal could be recruit 50 students by the next school year for this effort. And our strategy of doing that is by attending different school club meeting time. And then that's how we'll recruit that many students. So it can be as simple as that, or it can be more descriptive if that's what you need to tell us your milestone. We do ask for financial information. I'll go over that in a bit. And then the important note is leadership information should match the other form, which we do ask that you submit a diversity chart. And that's just for us to know who is in leadership of your organization. And as much information as you or your organization wants to share with us. We do require that diversity chart, but you're able to fill it out however best describes or you feel comfortable doing so. And I'll go over that later. And then we do ask for 3 references. We just want, we may not contact all 3 references, but we do ask for someone who is familiar with your work, but it's not part of your organization. Obviously, we wouldn't want someone from the current staff to be also a reference in your application, like a Chinook staff, because then it would be a slightly conflict of interest. So it should be someone from your community who knows your work. Okay. Questions so far? And I need to contact our financial person to join. So give me 1 second.
I just messaged Trina, so we're good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How did you contact her? Sorry. Oh, you're mute, but
I sent her a message on Slack.
oh, I don't know if she is on Slack. So let me just Teams her since I promise. Let me just make sure.
Okay.
I don't know if she checks. Yeah, just in case. But thank you. Now she will have 2 messages. Now I can't leave this form. Is there a question? I see a chat somewhere, but I can't open it. Okay, never mind. But we can start financials. We recommend, I recommend.
I think Trina's here now. I can't see
Okay.
her.
I cannot see Trina either.
Hello, sorry. Yes, I just got on. Hello,
Thank
everyone.
you.
All right.
Trina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name's Trina Moya. Oh, here, let me turn my video on so you can see me. Hi, everybody. I'm Trina Moya. I'm the Finance and Operations Manager for Chinook Fund. I'm going to review the financial aspects of the grant application, and at the end, Alma will share all of our contact information, and I am happy to answer any questions that any of you might have during the workshop, after the workshop. I'm happy to help guide you through the financial pieces. We try to make them as simple as possible, but there, are always questions. So feel free to reach out to me. Okay.
Thank
Alma.
you, Trina. And I can start with the first recommendation.
Okay.
For people applying, you will have the option to either submit your own financial forms, and I believe it's around 3 forms that we request if that's the option you decide. We also recommend, or it is available to you, to submit one of our templates that will ask you for all of that information. So once you're in the application and you get all the way to financial or finances portion of the application, you will have you'll be able to select which one you decide. And then if you decide to do the Chinook fund option, you'll be opening up a Google Sheets, and you'll have to save that or download it as your actually I would download it as a Excel if you're filling it out after downloading it, or you may also make a copy. So you can make a copy. I don't know if well, we can make a copy. Copy. And then you can edit this copy, but you'll still have to download as either a PDF or Excel. So after you plug in your numbers, 4 or 5, you'll still have to download as a PDF or Excel. I think those are the ones I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend anything other file. And then you can go back to the application and submit it. But let me know if you have other questions around that. Trina, do you have? I think the main thing for this is we do require, there's some areas that are required and some areas that are not required. We mostly want to know how you spend your money and how you plan to spend your money, your budget.
Alma, why don't I go ahead and take it from here?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, I just want to clarify the reason you have a choice between submitting your own reports or completing this form is, if you already have your financial statements and your budget prepared, there's no need for you to go in and punch those numbers into our form. You're welcome to just attach your own financial statements. But we do have this form. Do you want to click back on the form for me, Alma? There we go. That is, as I said, we try to make it as simple as possible. So I've highlighted, the cells where you need to enter your name and the date that your fiscal year starts. So I'm guessing that most of you are probably on a calendar fiscal year. So you start January 1st through December 31st, but some of you may be on different fiscal years. Chinook Fund's fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So I just want to know so that when we look at your financial information, what period of time we're looking at. And then for the column B, where it says last fiscal year actual totals, those should be for your fiscal year 2024. I realize it's fairly early in the year, the new year. So if you are on a calendar fiscal year, even if your 2024 numbers aren't completely finalized, please enter your preliminary numbers at least to give us an idea of your financial information. So that's what goes in column B for last fiscal year. if you're brand new and you are just starting out with fiscal year 25, just enter NA in that row 10, and that will, so that we know why you left that column blank. But if you were operating in for fiscal year 24, we do want to see your information. And then in column C, that's for your current year, fiscal year 2025 budgeted information. So it is helpful for us if we can see, like, we've entered in the form, there are a few different like types of income, a few different types of expenses, just as a kind of a guide. And you're welcome to enter, to type over, you know, if you have a different income source or different types of expenses that aren't listed here, you're welcome to change those and enter the amounts for, again, last fiscal year and current budget. You aren't required to give us a full detailed list of every income source and every expense. You can just enter your totals for last year and for the upcoming year in, let's see, row 18 for total income and row 29 for total expenses. So we do at least need to know what your totals are. And then row 30 for net income or net loss, also known as change in net assets, that will auto calculate once those totals are entered. So that's the kind of income statement for piece of the form. And then for the balance sheet part, all we're asking you to provide us is as of your last fiscal year end. So again, we want to know what that fiscal year end date was. So if you're on a calendar year, it will be 12/31/24. Whoops, can you scroll back down there to the bottom? Thank you. We want to know what the total cash, your total cash or bank balance was as of the end of your last fiscal year. And then in the column C, we want to know, so if that was as of 12/31 and you're submitting this in February, the most current month then will be January 31. So we want to know what the balance was as of January 31. So that's just a very quick overview of our form, which is one of your options for submitting with the application. All right, Alma. Let's see, so let's go on to the next slide. Or yeah, I guess we went through, a few of those. Okay. So if you choose to submit your own financial reports instead, again, if you already have those completed or you just don't want to fill out our form and you want to complete your own or submit your own, these are the 3 reports that we require. So your balance sheet as of your last completed fiscal year end. So that should be as of the end of your fiscal year 2024. It's also known as a statement of financial position. And then your income statement for your last completed fiscal year. It's also known as a profit and loss or statement of operations. For an example, if you're on the calendar fiscal year, it should cover the full 12 months of January 1st through December 31st. And then we want your budget for the current fiscal year. So if you're on a calendar fiscal year, it would cover January 1st through December 31st of 2025. And again, even if your 2024 numbers aren't finalized yet, just provide preliminary information and just let us know, indicate somewhere on the report title that it's preliminary. So any questions on anything that I've covered so far? Okay. So just, I know some of you, this may be very, information that you're very familiar with, but for those of you who don't really understand financial reports, you're not really sure what we're talking about by balance sheet or income statement or profit and loss statement. I just wanted to provide a quick overview of what each of the reports that we'd asked for, what they include. So again, the balance sheet is known as a statement of financial position. It should be dated as of your last fiscal year end. So the balance sheet lists your assets, which is what you own, your liabilities, which is what you owe, and your net assets or your equity, which is the difference between those two. So your assets have to equal your liabilities plus your net assets, or else your balance sheet doesn't balance. And that's where I've highlighted in this example here in light green, total assets of 43,809. And then down at the bottom, total liabilities plus net assets equals the same amount, 43,809. So again, assets are just things that you owe. Most, smaller or newer organizations, that's going to be your bank account. You might have some, grants or donations that are owed to you that have been promised, but you haven't received yet. This is just an example. This is not saying that you should have all of these categories on here, but it's just to let you see like what does a balance sheet look like. All right, I think we can go on to the next page. And then the income statement, which again is also known as a profit and loss statement or a statement of operations. It covers a period of time. So while the balance sheet is as of a specific date, the income statement covers a period of time. And what we're asking for is your last completed fiscal year. So it should cover a full 12 months. And the ending date of your income statement should be the same date as your balance sheet, because they're both as of the end of your last fiscal year. So it includes your income or revenue, funds that you've received, donations or grants, maybe interest income, and how you spend that money. So salaries, consultants, rent, supplies, etc., those kinds of things. Your total income minus your total expenses will be your net income, or if it's a negative number, it would be your net loss. And that's also known as your change in net assets. Okay, Alma. And then the third report, if you don't use our form, would be your budget for the current fiscal year that you're in. So for, I think, just about everybody, that's going to be fiscal year 25. It is your best and most realistic estimate of funding that you expect to receive, so your income or revenue, and what you will spend it on, your expenses. And contrary to popular opinion or myth, the budget does not have to balance. I know a lot of organizations want to have a balanced budget every year, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I know from experience that it's very rare that you bring in each year exactly the same amount as what you spend. And you usually want to end the year with some cash. So, it's very often that you will have either a net income, as this example here has. It's has total revenue budgeted of $201,500. It has total expenses budgeted of $171,245 for a projected ending net income of $30,255. There may be years where let's say you got a $100,000 grant last year and you only spent $75,000 of it, and so you have $25,000 left over. That revenue is in the bank for you to spend in your current year's expenses, but it's not going to be new income that's going to show up in your budget. So that's why an example of why some years you may have a budgeted net loss. because you have that 25,000 in reserve from the prior year to spend on this year's expenses. So just an example to explain that your budget doesn't always have to balance to zero. Your revenues don't always have to match your expenses exactly. So then any questions on any of those 3 examples of the reports, the balance sheet, the income statement, or the budget? So it's just and these samples that I'm showing you it's not to say that your budget has to look like that. Just one example of a budget that you might see. All right, if there's no questions, we can move on.
Okay.
Is that it, Alma, for the finance?
Let me make sure.
I thought there was other slides after that, but maybe not.
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Unless I accidentally
Okay.
moved it all over. But thank you, Trina.
That's
If you
all
could,
right. Yeah.
are you
yeah.
able to stay in case there are some questions? Or if people want to send us their questions, in case Trina needs to go. This is Trina's email, but you can also just email grants@chinookfund.org and ask your financial question or any questions related to the application.
Yeah.
I'll keep going.
And everybody's going to get a copy of the slides at the end, right, Alma? So they'll have
Yes.
that slide with my contact information. I do want to just mention, I would say the biggest or the most common problem that we have with what gets submitted with the applications that causes us to have to follow up with applicants is people who are attaching their own reports, and they send us, instead of your balance sheet, your income statement, and your budget, they might send like 2 copies of the balance sheet and no income statement, or the budget for last year instead of this year. So those are probably the most common problems that we have with the financial pieces of this. So just make sure that you're attaching one of each of those reports. And again, if you're filling out our form, or whether you're attaching your own and you have questions, you're not sure if what you are submitting for your income statement is actually an income statement or is what we're looking for, always happy to have you send it to me in advance to have me look at it before you submit it with your application, or to answer any questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. I am gonna hop off, Alma, but again, just shoot me an email or Alma, and happy to answer questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Trina. I do have other slides, so you're still able to continue with us. I want to jump really quick to the amount of the grants. And then we'll go back to the application. But the startup, we have 2 types of grants that we fund. We have a startup option and established one. So thank you to the people who are staying and the people who need to go. We'll share the PowerPoint afterwards. But to continue, the startup application, or it's the same application for both options. But we typically fund either a $4,000 or $10,000. And it's what you select at the beginning. So a startup option is for the people or the organizations that are relatively new. And it is a little less competitive than the established one, which is 1 grant of $10,000 for organizations that are already established. So the application will be a little more competitive. Not the application, but the process will be a little more competitive. And that's based on, you're able to evaluate yourself, though, on either of those. So I did want to cover that. So that will give you an idea of what we ask for in terms of the financials. But it doesn't, oh, sorry. But it doesn't matter if if you apply for 7,000 instead of 10,000, it doesn't make your application less competitive. So we recommend you apply for the full amount of your category. So if you're applying for a startup, apply for the 4,000. And if you're applying for established, apply for the full 10,000. We do have organizations that somehow will submit $7,000 and they select established as the amount requested. So I just wanted to make a note of that. That it doesn't just apply for the full amount of each category, because it doesn't really matter otherwise. You might just as well apply for the most you can get. So these are just other comments. We already went over milestones. There's a little bit of that. This is a new question, so if you've applied in the past, oh, is there a threshold? There's a question in the chat. So is there a threshold for startup versus established? No, it doesn't really. Usually startups don't have a previous budget. So like Trina said, they'll leave they're very new, if so they might leave information out, but it's because they don't have it. But there's not a budget threshold, or I don't know which, or you may have more detail in your question that I may be missing, but it's just the startup is only determined by how new your organization is. It's not. Oh, yes. So we usually, there may be some outliers, but usually groups that are less than 4 years old can apply to startup grants. But that's the only limited condition. That just means the groups that are older than 5 years or than 4 years, we will recommend to apply as established. But that's the only. But you may be 2 years and apply for established, if that makes sense. You don't need. You can self-define for established. It's usually smaller groups don't have as much competition because they don't have as much time. But usually unless we notice like a bit, like you just started and want to apply established. If you have a very strong year already, you may get with that, but will be recommended you apply a startup. In transition. If your organization is going through a transition, I think you just telling us about that transition and why you chose which grant to apply with, that would be enough. I don't know what you mean by a more programmatic space. Is that, or for everyone, there's a question in the chat that is asking, what if the organization is in the midst of a major transition into a more programmatic space? And I'm not sure how to answer. Or could you provide more detail on your question? I'm guessing it's just a transition. So like any transition, if you're able to communicate whatever you want to share with us about that, as long as it's within the eligibility, we'll be considering your application. And they will provide information in the application. A lot of these are additional considerations. The other note about the application is that we recommend you apply for general operating versus project support. So you'll have an option in the application to decide if you're applying for a specific project or general operating. And that's usually we have the project support option because sometimes the organization's goals or mission is not really a strong application because they don't have community organizing as their focus, or they don't have a priority as their focus, but they have a program or a project that is very aligned with our criteria and our values and our priorities. So then it would be a stronger on their application to focus on that project rather than the whole organization's operating general operations. But usually, if your organization fulfills the criteria as a whole, like your mission is aligned with Chinook's criteria or priorities, then I recommend you apply as general operating. So these are the details. We do fund fiscally sponsored organizations, or 501c3s or worker-owned cooperatives. So that's something there. Any questions right now? Okay, I moved around a little bit. Oh, the only other change is if you applied in the past that has happened is we no longer require a 1-year work plan. We just ask for the milestone. So that's where you explain what you're gonna use with the funding over this next period of time. So you don't need to give us a whole work plan. It used to be a requirement in the past. Okay, we're now at almost complete. So this is a diversity chart that we request from you. And this is just for reference. Oh. But this is what it looks like, and you'll be able to download it and then upload it again. Make sure, or hopefully you're able to submit at least some information about your leadership, because that is how we look at that criteria on our end. So when we look at constituent leadership, I think that's the main one, community-wide. But mainly constituent leadership, we want to see who makes up the leadership of your organization or your project. If you're only focusing applying for project support, then you can uplift your project leadership, but you still need to uplift your organization leadership. So we know who's overseeing that project. But if you're only applying for general operating, we just need to see the leadership of your organization or anyone else you want to uplift, but they need to be in the leadership role. And then so you will list who's going to be staff. You have the option to do other leadership. So this is where you can edit that portion when you download and put in a youth advisory board or a community advisory group or another advisory group or board that you want to uplift. We mostly ask about staff and board, but you can add other people. And you can also add other identities. So if we have people who work with the criminal law system, previously incarcerated, previously homeless, or currently unhoused. So there's other positions of privilege or lack of privilege that people want to highlight about their specific population. Things like people with disability. Oh, it has ability already here. But there's other types of identities that you're welcome to highlight if you think that makes more sense for your organization as well. So you're able, I think there's an example. So you're able to put a number on that category. There's also self-identify as an option. Okay. So again, reminders from the application. You're able to review your pre-submission. And you're also able to review it after you submit, I believe. But do let us know if you just need to check in with us as you complete it or if you have other questions. Wait, there's a question in the chat. So it says, not sure if you're going to answer, but would you mind sharing the approximate acceptance rate in the past or about how many applications you receive and how many receive funding? It depends on the cycle and the money the Giving Project members are able to fundraise. I think last cycle I can give you that number, though it changes every year. But last cycle or the fall 2024, we received I think 52 applications, and they're still reviewing. I think right now 17 applications are on the final review, but they may still be applications that don't get funding. But all of 17 of them might get funding, if that makes sense. So they're still in the process, in the final stage of review. They're so close to making a decision. I think they're going to start making decisions this week. So that's 17 out of 52 applications. But that depends on the type of application and how many applications we receive. So it's not a strict number. Sometimes we might fund more organizations, sometimes less. So yeah, don't take that as we will definitely accept those 17 at the end. But any other questions right now? You will be notified if we have questions about your budget, your attachments, your budget, your attachments before. Oh, I was seeing a comment in chat. But if we have questions about your attachments, you will get those questions before the review process starts. So I probably won't be able to read all your applications in case I have questions about a specific question or a question wasn't completed for some reason. But I and other colleagues are gonna review the attachments before they go to review for the Giving Project. So if we have questions about your budget, we're missing documentation, your diversity chart is not there, we will reach out to you. But we still appreciate if you're able to complete everything before the deadline and double check that your submitted document is actually the document you want to submit to us. So, but you will hear from us if not. Okay, so if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to grants@chinookfund.org. For questions about financials, you can reach out to Trina directly. We are currently recruiting for the Giving Project program. So if you have colleagues that want to learn more about fundraising, want to be part of the grant making process, learning as a cohort together what social justice philanthropy is, please invite them to consider. And then I had there was a chat that I want. Yes, so 80,000 is usually the least they will fundraise. So usually the Giving Project fundraises even more than that. And that's the plan. It depends on the state of the world and how people, their communities are and how big their individual goal is. So if you know people who are interested in the Giving Project who are only able to fundraise, I don't know what's small, $1,000 as an individual, $500, or they want to contribute something, but they don't have a lot of money, they can still apply to learn more about what the process or how they could improve their fundraising. Or if they're a great community member and we want their grant making view to come and join us as well. As long as they're passionate about this type of work, they can join. That's it. Any other questions, comments? We're ending a little